He turned down millions when everyone was waiting for him to say yes. This is the story of a man who endured 10 years of failure, lost everything, nearly ruined his relationships, and just when success was within his grasp, he did something no one expected. Owens was 32. 10 of those years were a complete failure, not metaphorically or exaggeratedly, but literally. 10 years of attempts, dozens of ideas, hundreds of sleepless nights, and no breakthrough. The business that was supposed to change the world turned into a shadow figure that stole money, time, and peace of mind. He lived in Sacramento, California, in a modest apartment above a laundromat. In the mornings, he worked at a coffee shop, not out of passion, but to have some income. The rest of his time was devoted to his startup. His idea? An app that would help seniors find trusted volunteers to help them at home for free. It sounds simple, but the technical aspects, legalities, and lack of a team meant that everything was falling apart. In the second year of this struggle, he met Emma. She worked as a nurse at a local clinic, caring every day for the people he was trying to reach with his idea. They were introduced by an elderly woman whom Danny drove every week. She was Emma's patient. The first conversations were cautious. He didn't want to impress her. She wasn't in a hurry to open up. But time did its thing. After a few months, they weren't just dating, they were a team. Not in business, in life. "Danny, if you want, I'll go into this with you completely," she said one evening as he sat silently at his laptop, staring at yet another rejection letter from an investor. "I want to," he replied, "but I can't ask you to lose everything like I did." She smiled. "I'm not losing. I'm with you." That gave him strength. For a while, the next 3 years were the most intense. They rented a small office space. They hired a freelance designer. They ran a pilot program in a neighborhood for seniors. There were many promises, several favorable articles in local publications, even an invitation to a hackathon in San Jose. But then, everything fell apart again. Someone stole their idea and launched a similar product with a large budget. Their code was hacked. Their user base disappeared. And most importantly, they ran out of money. Debt for office rent, a negative balance in the bank account, silence from potential partners. Danny started waking up at night with a tightness in his chest. Emma held on, but he saw her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. There was exhaustion there. There was a question, how much longer? In the 8th year, things got even worse. After her father's death, Emma took a break from everything, from the business and from their life together. She didn't leave, but she wasn't fully there either. Danny was left alone. Again, just like in the first year. But this time, the pain was much worse. One evening, sitting at the car wash where he worked nights to pay off a new loan, Danny thought he didn't want to do it anymore. He didn't want to look for a solution. He didn't want to convince himself that it made sense. He opened his notebook. The page was blank. At the top, he wrote, "Why haven't I given up yet?" He didn't know the answer, but he couldn't close the notebook. The next morning, after waking up after 2 hours of sleep, Danny noticed an email with the subject line, "Your microgrant application has been reviewed." He couldn't even remember when he had submitted it. Maybe 6 months ago, between night shifts and technical glitches. He opened the email without much hope. He was used to rejection. But there was something else. "We are pleased to inform you that your project has passed the preliminary selection and is invited to the second stage of the application process for funding in the amount of $20,000. Danny read it 3 times. It wasn't the end, it wasn't a victory, just a chance. But for him, it was a beacon in the darkness. Intuitively, he dialed Emma, even though they had hardly spoken in the last few weeks. She answered quietly. "Hi, Em." "I saw the letter," she interrupted. "I'm still subscribed to the mailing list. It might change things. If you're still." She was silent. Then she said, "Danny, I'm coming over tonight. We need to talk." That evening, she stood at his door with the same invisible exhaustion, but with a spark still alive in her eyes. "I don't know how much strength we have left," she said, "but I know that if we don't take this chance, we'll regret it even more." And they sat down at the laptop again, just like before, together. The application process was complicated. They had to update their financial plan, provide details about their partners, and outline the product structure. They only had 3 weeks. Danny slept 3 hours a night. He worked at a car wash, then ran to a coffee shop, and then returned to coding. Emma helped with the legal side, found volunteers for recommendations, and looked for user stories. They spent the last night on the floor, drinking cold coffee, and feeling their bodies give up. But at exactly 3:57 a.m., the application was complete. And then the waiting began. A week, then another. On the third week, a letter arrived. It was short. Unfortunately, due to high competition, Danny didn't finish reading. He went outside and just stood there, his hands pressed against his knees. It wasn't just a blow, it was a cold shower on his still smoldering hopes. But this time something was different. He didn't feel devastated, because during those 3 weeks, for the first time in years, he felt part of a team. He felt alive. He felt that he was no longer alone. And then he saw something else. A second letter, sent 2 minutes after the rejection. Subject: Invitation to the Cambridge Foundation Partnership Program. He opened it. There were a few lines. We are unable to fund you directly, but we find your idea valuable. We would like to discuss the possibility of integrating your product into our platform as an independent partner. If you are interested, we invite you to an online meeting on Wednesday. It wasn't a lifeline, but it was a bridge. Danny returned to the room. We haven't won yet, he told Emmy. But I think this is the beginning of a new game. On Wednesday morning, at exactly 9 a.m., they logged into Zoom. They didn't turn on their cameras right away. Emma was adjusting the lighting, and Danny was restarting his laptop to avoid any glitches. Then a woman wearing glasses appeared on the screen with the Cambridge logo in the background. Her name was Ruth Grayson, Director of Partnership Development. She spoke clearly and concisely, without unnecessary emotion. We reviewed your pitch. It's a good idea, but you're not the first to try something like this. We're not interested in the concept, but in whether you can integrate it into real-world processes. She listed the conditions. Their code had to be audited. They had to adapt the interface to Cambridge requirements. And most importantly, they had to find at least 100 real users within 3 weeks to prove that the system was viable. If you achieve this, she said, we can offer you an official partnership. No funding, but access to our user base and technical infrastructure. It was a lot. An opportunity, yes, but at the same time, another almost impossible challenge. After the call, they sat in silence. Emma was the first to break the silence. 100 people in 3 weeks. No budget. No team. And with code that's barely holding together, Danny added. But then she looked at him the way she had in their first year, with a challenge. But this isn't the first time we've faced the impossible. They got to work. First, they rebuilt the database, rewriting half of the architecture, optimizing queries, and adding the multi-factor authentication required by the audit. They did all this at night. During the day, Emma called clinics, rehabilitation centers, and hospices. She didn't ask for money, just permission to post information about the app. Many places didn't even respond. But one evening, when she was almost asleep, she received a message from the administrator of a nursing home. 10 residents are ready to test your app. They all have smartphones. Come on Saturday. That was the beginning. By the end of the week, they had 37 registrations. After posting in a local group, they got 21 more. But time was running out. On Friday of the second week, they were stuck at 76 users. Maybe it's going to be almost again, Danny said quietly. Our best effort, but no finish line. Emma looked at him. What if it's not? She went outside and recorded a video. Emotional, sincere, simple. This is an app created by 2 people who want our parents and grandparents to not be alone. If you want to help, sign up. It's free, and it could change someone's life. She posted it on TikTok, Facebook, and Reddit. The next morning, 146 new people had signed up for the app. Danny sat with his phone in his hands, unable to believe his eyes. We did it. We did it, Emma said. But let's see if it's enough. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Cambridge. There was no subject line, just a name, Ruth Grayson. Danny opened it and began to read. Hello, you have successfully completed the preliminary stage. The next step is to conclude a partnership agreement. In accordance with Cambridge policy, all partnership decisions must comply with legal standards and include certain quality and support guarantees. To this end, we offer the following. This was followed by a 14-page document. The first few lines were formal, but then came a series of points that essentially meant one thing. Cambridge wanted to integrate the app as an internal development. In other words, full rights to the functionality, joint ownership of the code, restrictions on independent development in the same field. So they want us, but on their terms. Danny summed up, closing his laptop. They want to be in charge, Emma said. But they don't understand that this isn't just code to us. And then came the most difficult question in 10 years. Are we willing to lose part of ourselves to save what we've created? They took a break. One day, then another. Two voices fought in Danny's head. One said, "This is your chance. We're finally afloat. Give in and move on." The other said, "This is yours. If you give it up now, there will be nothing real left." On the evening of the third day, as they reread the document, Emma said, "Let's imagine that we sign tomorrow. What will happen in a year? We'll be part of a big system, but will we still be ourselves?" It seemed too idealistic, but the truth was that Danny couldn't take another loss. They wrote a reply, polite, professional, but with a clear refusal. "We appreciate the opportunity and support, but we prefer to keep the project independent. We are open to other forms of cooperation, without transferring control." An hour later, the reply came. It was short. "Too bad. Good luck. The collaboration is over." The next few days were difficult. No new users, no investors, no team, just the two of them, and silence. But within that silence, something began to grow. Because for the first time in 10 years, they weren't looking for someone else's permission to move forward. They said no, and that became their yes to themselves. A week later, Emma received a call. The medical center where she had once interned was looking for a tool to coordinate post-discharge care for patients. "Emma," said the manager, "I saw the video. Your app might be right for us. Are you still working on it?" She smiled. "Yes, we are. We never stopped." The Gilchrist Medical Center that approached Emma was not large, only 36 doctors and a few hundred patients per month. But it was their first real client, not a volunteer, tester, or sympathizer. It was an organization that wanted to integrate the product into its processes. The terms were clear: 2 weeks of testing, then a short-term agreement. The pay was minimal, but it was formal. And most importantly, they agreed to keep the team independent. Danny hardly spoke during the first few days of integration. He immersed himself in the code. He adapted the functions to the doctor's requirements, created a separate module for supporting patients after discharge, and automated notifications for medical staff. Emma conducted training. She communicated with doctors, answered questions, listened to skepticism, and dispelled doubts. The first 3 days were chaotic. The system froze. Patients couldn't log in. One of the nurses accidentally deleted some data. On the 4th day, someone from the center's management wrote an angry letter. "We can't risk patients' health because of an unstable service." Danny worked until 4 a.m. He rewrote the entire logic module. After testing, he wasn't sure, but he sent the new version anyway. In the morning, the response came. Everything went smoothly for the first time. "Well done." It was a small "well done." But after a decade of failures, it sounded like applause. 2 weeks later, the medical center signed a 3-month contract. Danny and Emma were thrilled, but they knew it was only temporary hope. They needed more customers, more users, more consistency. And then they decided to take a different path, through the community. They created an online group called Care Together, not as an advertisement, but as a space where children and grandchildren of elderly people could share problems, stories, and advice. There was no mention of the app, only support. 2 weeks later, the group had 2,000 members. On the 3rd week, the first question appeared. "Does anyone know how to safely find a volunteer to help my grandmother at home?" And then Emma left her first comment. "There's an app we're developing. It's free. If you want, I can tell you more." After that, there was a wave of subscriptions, messages, and private letters. But against the backdrop of this breakthrough, something unexpected happened. Someone created a fake copy of their app. It had a similar name, logo, and even copied text from the website. But there were paid subscriptions and no data protection. Several users had already been affected. "This could be the end of us," said Danny. "If everyone thinks it's us, we can't stay silent," replied Emma. And then they decided to take action. Publicly, directly, at risk. Danny wasn't used to being in the public eye, but now it was inevitable. The fake version of their app had already been downloaded over 300 times. Outraged posts began appearing on Reddit. "This is a scam. They took my money and the service doesn't work. This is fraud. Delete this app immediately." Some users even contacted the support service of the real app, not realizing that it was a copy. "If we don't respond publicly, We'll lose everyone's trust, Danny said. But if we tell the truth, we risk a scandal. There will be a backlash. We've already called it, Emma replied firmly. Now we have to learn to swim. They recorded a video. Short, spontaneous, no studios or scripts. We are Danny and Emma. For 10 years, we have been building a service to make the lives of older people safer. Recently, a fake app has appeared that has nothing to do with us. We don't take money. We don't sell data. We work transparently. If you have been a victim of fraud, please report it. We will do everything we can to stop this fake app. They posted the video on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. They included a link to the original website. And they waited. At first, there was silence. Then, after 5 hours, the first comments appeared. Thank you for your honesty. I also came across these scammers. It's good that you spoke up. This needs to be shared. The post went viral. In 24 hours, it was viewed by 140,000 people. A day later, the news appeared on local television. A journalist from a news channel invited them for an interview. Danny didn't want to, but Emma said, "This time we can't hide." In the interview, they told the whole story, how it started, how they were hacked, and how they turned down a big company. They also talked about how they were driven by the idea of helping those who are often forgotten. That interview changed everything. 2 days later, they were contacted by a lawyer who specialized in defending digital products. He offered to help for free as a volunteer. "My mother is no longer with us," he said, "but she never got the help she needed when she was struggling. I see what you are doing, and I want to help." He filed a complaint about the fake app, got it removed from the App Store, and helped register the trademark. This time, they didn't win because of code. They won because of trust. After that, clinics, rehabilitation centers, and even small municipalities started reaching out to them. Some wanted advice. Some wanted test access. But with the new scale came a new problem. They couldn't keep up. The code was weak. The infrastructure was primitive. They needed a team, but they still had no money. And then a message arrived. It was concise. It was from someone they had already met. "We've seen your story, and we're ready to talk. This time, on different terms." Ruth Grayson, Carebridge. The Zoom call was scheduled for Friday evening. This time, Danny wasn't nervous. He was tired, but calm. They had been through so much over the past few weeks that even Carebridge didn't seem overly threatening now. Ruth Grayson appeared on the screen again. But this time, her tone was different. Less formal. No logo in the background. No glasses. "Your video about the fake." She paused for a moment. It affected many people, including us. She didn't apologize for her previous refusal, but she didn't need to. Her tone showed that she respected them. "We have a proposal," she said. "We want to create a separate fund within Carebridge, which you can join as an independent contractor. Your project will remain yours. You will retain control, but you will have access to our resources, hosting, support, a team of testers, legal protection." It sounded too good to be true. "What's the catch?" Emma asked bluntly. Ruth didn't dodge the question. "The contract is for 1 year. During that time, you are not allowed to work with other large organizations without our consent. But you remain the owners, and after a year, you are free to choose." Danny was silent. He saw a map in front of him, 2 roads. One was to continue fighting alone, stretched to the limit of his resources. The other was a temporary restriction, but with breathing room. When the call ended, they sat in silence. "What do you think?" Emma asked. "For the first time in 10 years, I'm not afraid to say yes." But she didn't smile. On the contrary, she lowered her eyes. "What if in a year you don't want to leave their orbit? Are you talking about business?" "I'm talking about you. You're changing. With every wave of responsibility, with every new decision, I see something growing in you. That scares me a little." It was a blow. Not aggressive, but painful. "I'm doing all this for us," Danny whispered. "And I'm afraid that soon there won't be any us left." The next morning, she left to spend a few days with her sister. Danny signed the contract. It was a logical, correct, strategic decision. And lonely. Now he had a team of 3 new developers, weekly meetings with lawyers, a 6-month development plan, and funding. His life was finally starting to look like he had imagined it 10 years ago. But instead of euphoria, he felt silence. And every night he stared at the empty seat at the table. Over the next 3 months, the user base grew tenfold. After an article was published in a national newspaper about a young developer who stood up to corporations and won, interest exploded. Hundreds of new users registered every day. CareBridge kept its promise. It provided infrastructure, technical support, and security. For the first time in 10 years, Danny wasn't building, he was scaling. And just when he finally started to breathe easier, when he no longer spent his nights wondering where he would get another $50 for hosting, she came. Emma returned. "I've been watching everything," she said, sitting down across from him in the same cafe where they had once started. "I've seen how you've grown. I didn't grow up without you." She lowered her gaze. "But not with me." The phrase hung in the air, heavy, bitter, but honest. "Danny, I don't mind that you've changed, but I'm afraid you've become someone who doesn't know when to stop." He fell silent, because he knew she was right. Over the past few weeks, he had begun to live by his schedule. His days were booked a month in advance. Every conversation was about ROI, analytics, expansion. "I'm losing you, even though you're still here," she said. He tried to keep his voice steady. "What if I don't know how to be both a creator and a partner? What if I don't know how to maintain balance?" Emma smiled sadly. "Then maybe it's time to learn again." She didn't demand anything. She didn't pressure him, but her presence was like a mirror. In it, he saw himself, tired, successful, and very lonely. Over the next few days, he slowed down. He started delegating. He gave himself permission to not be everywhere. And one morning, after 5 years of working on the product, he turned off his phone for the day and drove out of town with Emma. For the first time in a long time, he had no plans. They were silent for a long time, but it was a peaceful silence, not an anxious one. "You know," she said as they sat by the river, "I don't think this product was about older people. Not only. It was about us. About not wanting to leave people alone, and not wanting to be abandoned ourselves." He nodded. "I just wanted someone to stay, for something to remain." "And it did," she replied. "But now the question is, what do you want to do with it?" That same day, Danny received another offer. A large group of investors offered to buy a stake in the product. Not all of it, only 49%, for a sum that exceeded all his income from previous years combined. He held the letter on the screen for a long time. It was the end, and at the same time, a new beginning. But the price? Maybe control again, compromise again. Emma came up behind him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Now you know that not everything can be bought, but you also know that you can't carry everything on your shoulders forever." Danny sat up all night with the offer open on his screen. The number was large, very large. It meant more than just money, it meant recognition. "Look, you did it. This is proof." But next to it was another thought. This is another surrender of control, another step away from what you started. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He didn't move. In the morning, Emma made coffee and sat down next to him. "I'm not going to give you advice," she said, "but I will say one thing. There's a difference between what you've built and who you've become. If you lose one, you can rebuild. But if you lose yourself..." He looked at her. "I'm afraid. If I say no, it will be ego. And if I say yes, it will be betrayal. What if you say not yet?" Emma smiled. "And build it so that tomorrow you don't have to choose between money and yourself again." The thought wouldn't leave him. That same day, he wrote a letter to the investors. "We appreciate your interest, but we are not ready to give up even a share of the product. We believe in its potential and want to develop it ourselves. We are open to consultation and support, but not to ownership. Thank you for your understanding." The letter was not emotional, but it was precise. After pressing send, Danny closed his laptop, and for the first time in a long time, he exhaled. A few more weeks passed. The product stabilized. The partnership with CareBridge bore fruit. Integration, feedback, growth. But most importantly, the first public office opened. It was a small space in downtown Sacramento. 3 employees worked there. User training took place there. Volunteers came there for interviews. A sign hung at the entrance. "Care together, a space of trust." And there, on the wall, was another phrase, short but meaningful. "We are here so that no one is left alone." It wasn't a huge breakthrough, but it was something real. One evening, as he and Emma were walking home, she suddenly stopped. "Remember how you once wrote in your notebook, 'Why haven't I given up yet?' I remember." She smiled. "I think now you know the answer. But the story isn't over yet." Because a week later, a new message arrived in the email. Subject: Federal Startup Partnership Program. finalists selected, and among them was Care Together. Funding, national scale, recognition. But with that came new pressure, new demands, new choices. And the question, was all this just preparation for the real challenge? The federal program was something they had dreamed of since their first year. 5 years of funding, media support, and nationwide expansion. For most, it would have been the finish line. For Danny, it was a question. The terms were fair but tough. Signing an agreement for full access to the app's architecture, transferring some technical control, integrating into a centralized platform, and, most importantly, launching in a new format under the program's brand. That meant no Care Together name, no history, no face. Danny and Emma sat over the documents in the evenings, at first in silence, then with arguments. If we want to impact millions, this is the way, Emma said. This is scale. But if we lose our heart in the process, what will be left? Sometimes, to save more, you have to sacrifice the little things. And sometimes, the little things are the only reason why it all works. They turned to the team, to the first volunteers, to the users. The responses were mixed. Some wrote, "It doesn't matter what it's called, as long as it works." Others wrote, "Care Together was more than an app. It was a feeling that someone was there." This didn't make the choice any easier. In the final stage of the submission, Danny sat down alone. He opened the same notebook where it all began. The page was blank. He wrote, "Why did I start this?" And answered, "Because one day I realized how scary it is to be alone. And I promised myself I would do everything I could to prevent others from feeling that way." He closed the notebook and didn't submit it. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a quiet, personal, hard-won victory. They remained independent, not the biggest, but influential. Over the next year, they opened 3 more offices. They launched an educational program, and they held their first Care as a System forum. Most importantly, they didn't lose what started it all: humanity. At the platform's 10th anniversary celebration, Danny spoke to a small audience. His speech was short. "We're not beating the market. We're not fighting time. We're not competing with giants. We're just giving people the feeling that they're not alone. And maybe that changes more than any product ever could." After the speech, Emma approached him. She took his hand. "So, now you know how it all ended?" He smiled. "This isn't the end. It's a starting point." And they left the stage together.